Welcome to day 5 of this build. Crazy. And hopefully you can hear me better now. Thanks, Tim, for the heads up on the volume. I am using my old iPhone 5 to edit this and my old 10-year-old Celeron laptop to edit and post it. So if there's a problem, I always just assume it's on my end, but apparently it's just not very loud. But Sophie approves. Let's go. So today's project is the extruder, and there's your stepper motor, and you've got your drive gear and your idler there, and this was the original one stripped down to its barest components. And to explain why this has to be redone is this is how the hot end, I've got all the fan and heater taken off here, but you just put it in this keyhole slot, and that is literally all that held this in here while you're trying to print. If you can try to imagine printing with 4 or 5 millimeters of movement in the print head, it was an absolute joke. So I have to do something about that, but again, trying to keep all the original components, or as many as I can, so I'll have to do this in steps. I can't do this with one hand. Yes, Ron, I need to get a stand for my phone. I'll get there. I'm spending too much time building to deal with that right now. But here was my idea, was to take this piece and create, the bottom piece here, create something that would actually extend up into the holes so that it would clamp down into the holes, and also something that would clamp down into the J-head of this heatsink here. So what I did was create this, and this is my idea. This is basically the bottom plate down here, and then I added these pieces that stick up here, and this should clamp around the top of the hot end, and then I've got the 2 screw holes there to go all the way through and hold all this together. So when the screws are tightened, these 2 halves should come together and clamp down on that J-head. We'll see what happens. So here are these pieces printed off, and a little side note about 3D printing, as you guys all know this, I'm sure, but I had to pick, this surface right here that holds onto the hot end is the critical dimension. That's really hard to, it has to be exact and accurate, and these holes here too, these square holes. But because of that, I sacrificed one side of it and used supports on the bed. So I printed it like that so that this side would print. If I did try to use supports on this, it would look like crap, and I knew it wasn't going to work right. So this will look ugly, but I'm okay as long as it holds everything tight. So you can see how the hot end is supposed to be clamped into the notches on the one side. Here's the other notches. So when you put this together, that when I tighten the screws down, I put a little bit of a gap in there designed so that it doesn't pull together completely. There's always tension on top of that. And this actually, thankfully, I did what I did. This fits in here perfectly. There's just the right amount of gap that I wanted. I think this is going to work great, but that's the concept behind what's happening here. And here we are with those 2 pieces I printed right here. Printed them in black so they would match the color of the wood chunks there. So the square holes didn't line up as well as I'd hoped. I mean, they did go through. They're just tighter than I wanted. It has to do with my printer not printing inner diameter holes very well, but it did go in, so that's fine. And my holes line up for my screw holes here. I was amazed at all this, so I'll put it together now. And there it is all together. It looks pretty good. My gap was just right. That splits right down the middle there, but the pieces line up together perfectly. This is super solid. It's hard to do with one hand, but I was very pleased. So onward and upward. Oh, it's late. I might wrap this up tonight and talk more later about what I'm doing. But just so you see what's happening here, here's the whole hot end extruder, everything put together. My fan and my heater and nozzle and everything. Got my spring on my filament tensioner, and this is all going to mount. This is all going to mount right on this plate right here. I've still got to build a bracket for that. So that will end up being my hot end X motion on that. Still have to figure out how to drive it, but that driving will be the last thing I need to do before I can start printing. So I'm super close here.